The sound of shattering glass cut through the sterile silence. Elena's breath caught as she turned sharply, her heart leaping to her throat. Her son Leo stood frozen in the hallway, staring wide-eyed at the remains of a decorative vase he'd accidentally knocked over. Water pooled beneath the shards. A wilted lily drooped like a head bowed in apology. She rushed toward him, apologizing profusely to the receptionist, to the intern picking up the pieces, anyone who would listen. She couldn't afford this. Not today. But then a man stepped out from the glass office behind her. Sharp suit, clean cut, stillness in his stare. He didn't look angry, just stunned. "Elena," he said quietly, his voice frayed with disbelief. She blinked. "Yes, I remember your face," he whispered. "You saved my life." And just like that, the world tilted. Because Elena had never seen this man before in her life. Or so she thought. Stay with this story because the ending will rewrite everything you think you know about second chances, past debts, and the kind of love that grows when no one's watching. Elena gripped the edges of the metal sink with trembling hands, her reflection in the flickering fluorescent light above looking as exhausted as she felt. Her scrubs were stained, her hair tied back in a messy knot that had long since surrendered its shape, and her eyes, young but already bearing the weight of sleepless years, carried a glaze that bordered on hollow. Outside the break room, the intercom crackled with a nurse's page from the ER. Another trauma, another night that wouldn't end. It was her third 12-hour shift in 4 days. Leo was barely 6 months old, teething, and always feverish. The sitter had texted her again about late payments. Rent was due in a week. Her fridge was empty. And now she was being called back into emergency care after already clocking out. She was 24, and she didn't have the luxury of being tired. By the time she reached the ER doors, the team was already wheeling in the latest arrival. Male, mid-30s, blood everywhere. Multiple contusions, abdominal swelling, fractured ribs, a head wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. No wallet, no phone, no ID. Unidentified MVA came in from 91, and Dalton the paramedic shouted, barely pausing, as the stretcher was transferred to a trauma bed. No tags, nothing in the system. Possible internal bleeding. The staff hesitated. Unidentified patients without insurance meant paperwork nightmares, delayed approvals, and sometimes no follow-up care. And this hospital? It was already drowning. But Elena didn't move toward the door. She moved toward him. "We don't have time for debate," she said sharply, grabbing gloves and snapping them on. "Page Dr. Nguyen. He's coding." She leaned in, applying pressure to his abdomen. His skin was cold pale beneath the blood. She could see part of his scalp had torn open from the crash impact. He needed surgery fast. "Let's prep for transfusion." His BP's crashing. "There's no match on file, someone called." "Then draw mine," Elena said without looking up. "We're the same build. We don't have time." There was a moment of stunned silence. "Elena," the charge nurse began. "I said draw mine." Minutes blurred into hours. She stayed through the trauma care, helped monitor him post-op, and only when he was finally stabilized, tubes running from his chest, his arm, did she realize the sky outside had turned pink with dawn. She scribbled a note in the chart, removed her gloves, and exhaled. There was a faint beep of machines behind her, a whisper of breath. She turned. His eyes were barely open, glassy, barely there, but he was awake and looking at her. He struggled to speak. She leaned in. "Why?" he whispered, voice like wind over gravel. "Would you?" Elena smiled faintly, her face tired but kind. "Because someone has to." That was the last time she saw him. 2 days later, his bed was empty, his name still unknown. In its place at the edge of the bedside table sat a folded napkin from the hospital cafe. The handwriting was shaky slanted. "Thank you for giving me my life back. I won't forget your face." That was it. No name, no signature, just a promise, half a memory etched on cheap paper. She kept the napkin, folded it, tucked it into an old baby photo album behind a picture of Leo sleeping on her chest. Life didn't stop to explain itself, and neither did she. In the years that followed, Elena's world became a rotation of day shifts, night shifts, second jobs, and quiet sacrifices. She took on freelance caregiving work when hospital hours were cut. cleaned offices on weekends, cooked for elderly neighbors in exchange for babysitting. Leo grew, so did the bags under her eyes. Her dreams shrank, not because they died, but because they needed to fit into the few hours between school drop-offs and rent payments. But every so often, when Leo was asleep and the apartment was quiet, she'd open that photo album and look at the napkin again. Not because she thought he'd come back, but because she needed the reminder. Once she had done something extraordinary. Once she had saved a life. And maybe one day that would count for something more than a fading memory. The apartment smelled faintly of instant noodles and lemon disinfectant. Eleanor stood at the small dining table surrounded by scattered papers, resumes, rejection emails, application confirmations, and a half-drunk cup of coffee she'd reheated twice and still hadn't touched. Leo now, 9, sat cross-legged on the couch in his school uniform, flipping through a well-worn graphic novel with his headphones halfway on. He knew the drill. Mommy needed quiet when she was job hunting. The screen in front of Elena blinked. Thank you for applying. At this time, we've chosen to move forward with other candidates. She sighed and rubbed her temples. It had been 3 years since she'd left nursing. The pandemic had gutted her hospital's budget, and she'd been one of the many to lose her position when elective procedures were halted. Her second job cleaning at a dentist's office closed within weeks. Childcare costs had spiked. There were days she'd gone without meals, so Leo could eat something hot at night. But even in the chaos, she adapted. She started taking online courses during Leo's naps and school hours, Google Ads, social media strategy, email marketing. It was the future, people said. And for the first time in her adult life, Eleanor dared to think beyond survival. She wanted a job that didn't break her back, a job that let her be present for Leo. A job where she could build anything that couldn't be taken away by a budget cut or an empty insurance file. But the industry didn't want her. At least that's how it felt. Every interview ended the same. We're looking for someone with more agency experience, or your background's a bit unconventional, or the dreaded, we're impressed, but we've decided to go in another direction. She didn't have the right network. No LinkedIn clout. Just a mother's determination and a few certificates from online programs she squeezed in between cooking, cleaning, and parenting. And companies didn't hire people like her. Until one night at 1:43 a.m., as she lay on her side beside Leo's bed, scrolling through her email, she saw a subject line that made her sit up straight. Interview invitation, Ryden & Co., marketing assistant position. She blinked. Read it again. Ryden & Co. She'd applied on a whim a few weeks back after seeing the role posted in a Facebook group. The listing was vague, just an entry-level support role at a fast-growing media firm. But it had 2 things most jobs didn't. It offered full-time hours and full medical benefits. She accepted the interview slot before her fingers could doubt it. The interview was set for the following Tuesday at 10 a.m. She didn't sleep the rest of that night. The morning of the interview, the sitter cancelled. I'm so sorry, Eleanor. Mrs. Dupree's frazzled voice came through the phone. My grandson has a fever, and It's okay, Eleanor said quickly, though her stomach twisted. Don't worry. She hung up and turned to Leo, who was brushing his teeth. Change of plans, she said gently. You're coming with me. He frowned, spitting toothpaste into the sink. To your interview. You'll wait in the hallway with your book. I'll be in and out. Just don't move or talk to anyone, okay? Leo nodded solemnly. Can I bring my snacks? Eleanor smiled. All the snacks. Ryden & Co. was located on the 23rd floor of a high-rise downtown. The lobby was sleek, all brushed steel and warm wood, with potted plants too perfect to be real. Eleanor wore her best blouse and slacks, the same ones she'd worn to Leo's first parent-teacher conference this year. She couldn't afford dry cleaning, but she'd ironed them the night before, every crease, straight as a page fold. They arrived early. Leo sat quietly in a chair by the front desk, headphones on a copy of Calvin and Hobbes in his lap. Eleanor checked in her palms, slick with nerves, and was led to a glass-walled meeting room overlooking the city. The view made her dizzy. She paced. Reviewed her mental script. Don't mention being a single mom. Focus on your strengths. Talk about your Canva portfolio. Smile. Just smile. The door clicked open behind her. Elena Cruz. She turned and froze. A man in his mid-30s stepped in. tall, dark hair neatly styled, light grey suit tailored and crisp. His presence was magnetic composed, but his eyes, behind all that polish, held a flicker of something unfamiliar. Recognition. He paused mid-step. "You're Elena," he said more to himself than to her. "Yes," she replied, carefully unsure. "Thank you for meeting with me." He blinked as if shaken from a thought. "Sorry. I'm Adrian Ryden, CEO." Her heart stuttered. The CEO she was supposed to meet with HR. He gestured to the chair. "Please sit." The interview began. Sort of. He asked a few standard questions, why marketing, why the career change, but his focus seemed scattered. His eyes kept drifting to the hallway beyond the glass where Leo sat flipping a page. "I'm sorry, I brought my son," she said quickly. Cheeks flushed. "I couldn't find childcare this morning, but I didn't want to cancel." Adrian shook his head slowly. "No, it's fine." He leaned back, then tilted his head, studying her. "You don't recognize me, do you?" Elena blinked. I don't think so." Before he could say more, crash! Both heads turned. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the floor. A small decorative vase by the entrance lay broken. Water spreading. Flower petals limp. Leo stood beside it, frozen in guilt. "I'll clean it. He's never like this. I promise." Elena began rising, but Adrian was already on his feet, moving toward the door. He crouched by Leo, scanning his face, not for injury, but for something else, something deeper. He looked back at Elena, and when he spoke, his voice wasn't calm. It trembled. "You saved my life." Eleanor's breath caught. "What?" He stood breathless. 10 years ago. Car accident. No ID. Public hospital. You donated blood. Stayed past your shift. I left a note." She stared at him, her heart pounding in her ears. "The napkin," he said. "I never forgot your face." The air seemed to thin around her, and then he smiled, slow, stunned, like a man seeing something impossible. "You changed everything for me." Elena sat back down in the glass-walled conference room, her knees nearly giving out beneath her. Across from her, Adrian Ryden, CEO founder, and the man she thought she'd never see again, was still processing what just unfolded. Outside the office, Leo had returned to his seat, eyes wide, his book forgotten. Inside, everything felt suddenly fragile. Eleanor's voice faltered. "I didn't know. I didn't realize it was you." He nodded slowly, like he couldn't believe it either. "Neither did I. Not at first." The silence between them stretched. Adrian folded his hands, elbows resting lightly on the table, and looked at her like he was seeing something rare, something too valuable to name. "I searched for you," he said, voice low. "For years." "You disappeared," Eleanor replied, the smallest hint of confusion lacing her tone. There was no name, no follow-up, just a napkin. He smiled almost sheepishly. "I wasn't supposed to live." Elena tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He leaned back in his chair, eyes flicking toward the skyline before meeting hers again. "That night, I'd been drinking, angry, driving too fast after a fight with my father. I crashed into a construction barrier. When I woke up in a hospital bed, I barely knew where I was. I overheard one of the nurses saying they didn't think I'd make it through surgery. And then, I saw you." His eyes softened. "You looked so young, so tired. But you wouldn't stop helping, even after your shift. You argued with the doctors. You gave your own blood." Elena swallowed. "I remember thinking," Adrian continued, "if someone could care that much about a stranger, maybe I didn't deserve to die after all." She opened her mouth, then closed it. There was too much, too many years in between, and yet a connection had surged to life again, like it had been waiting under the surface this whole time. He glanced at the hallway again, where Leo now sat with his chin tucked into his palm. "That's your son." She nodded. "Leo. He was 6 months old back then. His dad left just before the accident. I was trying to hold it together." Adrian nodded, face unreadable. "Looks just like you." Elena half smiled. "He got my stubbornness too. Lucky him." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city hummed beneath them, quiet and distant. Then Adrian cleared his throat. "I want you to know something. Before I even knew who you were, before I made the connection, I read your CV." Elena looked up. I read every word he continued, and I saw someone who didn't just change careers, but rebuilt her entire life. You taught yourself digital strategy. You handled freelancing part-time jobs raising a kid while getting certified in half the platforms my senior team still struggles with. She blinked. Wait, you actually? I didn't just consider your application, Elena Adrian said. I was the one who pushed it through. Even before this, before I remembered. Her breath caught. I meant to sit in on a few interviews today, he added. But when I saw your name and photo, I couldn't ignore the feeling. It was eating at me all morning. Elena looked down at her hands. Her nails were trimmed short fingers, slightly ink-stained from the printed resume she'd nervously rewritten the night before. All the old doubts started to creep in. You don't have to do anything because I helped you back then, she said quickly. That's not this interview. I didn't come here for charity. He nodded firmly. I know. I need this job, she added more softly. Not for favors, just for a future. Adrian leaned forward. Then let's build one. The offer came that same day. She started the following week as a junior marketing assistant, supporting 3 campaign leads and managing small community initiatives. It was entry-level in name, but Adrian made it clear she wasn't here to fetch coffee. She was here to grow. The adjustment was jarring at first. The office buzzed with people in trendy sneakers and wireless headsets, casually tossing out words like KPIs and conversion rates. Elena took it all in with the quiet focus of someone who didn't have time to fail. She showed up early, stayed late, took notes obsessively, and when no one was watching, she studied tutorial videos on her lunch breaks, refining her skills in targeting algorithms, design tools, and analytics. Adrian didn't hover, but he watched. In meetings, he'd often glance her way when others presented stale ideas. Over time, her voice began to carry more weight in the room. She suggested a local outreach campaign aimed at low-income neighborhoods that tripled engagement. Then came a partnership idea with a public school robotics club that went viral. By month 4, she was no longer just the assistant. She was being invited to brainstorms with the director of marketing. By month 6, she was leading her own projects. And through it all, Adrian kept his distance, mostly. They passed each other in the halls, in elevators, in quiet corners of campaign planning rooms. He always nodded, smiled, occasionally asked about Leo's latest comic book obsession. There were no grand declarations, no fast tracks, just a quiet, growing respect between 2 people who had once met in crisis and now stood shoulder to shoulder. One rainy Friday evening, nearly a year after the interview, Eleanor found herself working late in the office. Most of the team had left their laughter echoing from the elevator moments earlier. She sat at her desk reviewing slide layouts for an upcoming pitch. A soft knock tapped against the glass. She looked up. Adrian stood there, 2 coffees in hand. I remembered you like it black with a splash of cinnamon, he said, stepping inside. She raised an eyebrow. You remembered that from 10 years ago. He grinned. No. From 2 weeks ago when you yelled at the break room machine. She laughed for the first time that day. He set the coffee beside her and looked at the screen. This, the youth campaign. She nodded, trying to tighten up the visuals. It's almost there. You've built something incredible here, Elena. She looked at him, unsure how to respond. His eyes softened. I meant what I said, you know. Back then, I didn't just wake up from surgery. I woke up because of you. She stared at him. You're not still carrying that napkin around, are you? He reached into his wallet, pulled it out, a little worn, still folded. Elena's eyes widened. He shrugged. Some things are worth holding on to. And suddenly, she wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was seen, really seen. For the first time in nearly a decade, Eleanor felt like her life wasn't slipping between her fingers. Her mornings had rhythm drop. Leo off at school, catch the early train, pour into her projects at Ryden & Co. Afternoons meant pitch meetings, brand strategy brainstorms, or mentoring the new hires who looked at her like she'd always belonged here. Evenings were for quiet dinners with Leo, sometimes at their tiny kitchen table, sometimes on a blanket in the park with takeout and comic books. And sometimes Adrian would join. It started small. He'd swing by the office when he knew she was working late, offering coffee or takeout under the pretense of running into her. Then came the community events, where they'd co-host panels or visit youth centers together. They became a quiet team, their bond growing stronger beneath the surface, but it wasn't public. Not yet. Eleanor still lived with a carefulness she couldn't shake. Success to her still felt like a fragile glass sculpture, beautiful but easily broken. So when she came home one Wednesday evening and found a man sitting on the steps of her apartment building, arms crossed and legs sprawled like he owned the sidewalk, her stomach turned to ice. "Nice place," he said, smirking. "Didn't think you'd end up this far above your league." It was Marco, Leo's father. The last time she'd seen him, he'd slammed the door of their old basement studio after accusing her of trapping him with a child he didn't ask for. He hadn't sent $1 in child support, not a text, not even a birthday card. Until now, Elena stood frozen keys clenched in her fist. "What are you doing here?" He stood brushing imaginary dust off his jeans. "Saw you on that segment last week. You were in the background of that Ryden and Kobe press thing. Looked fancy." Her jaw tightened. "You've been stalking my interviews." He shrugged. Curious how the girl who begged me for formula money is now on billboards and videos with a CEO. Elena said nothing. Marco stepped closer, his smile cold. "You got lucky. That's all this is. Right place, right time." She crossed her arms. "Is that what you tell yourself?" He glanced up at the building. "Anyway, I figured it was time I had a relationship with my son." "No," she said firmly. Marco's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me, you don't get to show up now. Not after 9 years of silence. Not because you saw me in a headline. I have rights." She took a step forward, voice low. "You had rights. You gave them up when you disappeared. Maybe I didn't want to be around some nurse struggling to make rent," he snapped. "But you're different now. You've got something to lose." Her heart pounded. "Leave," he scoffed, "or what you'll call your rich boyfriend." The words hit harder than she expected, because even though Adrian wasn't her boyfriend, at least not officially, he had become a part of her world. A part she didn't want Marco anywhere near. She stepped back. "I'm not scared of you," she said. But her voice shook. Later that night, she sat on her living room floor, Leo asleep in his room, the lights dim. She held her phone in her lap, thumb hovering over Adrian's number. She didn't want to bring this into his world. Not the mess of her past, not Marco. But she also couldn't carry this alone. She called. He answered on the first ring. "Elena, I need to talk to you." They met the next morning at a quiet cafe near her building. Adrian arrived early, 2 coffees in hand, his expression already laced with concern. When she told him everything, he listened. No interruptions, no pity, just presence. "I don't know what he wants," Eleanor said finally. "But he made it clear he's watching." Adrian's jaw flexed. "You want me to speak to him?" She shook her head. "That's not your responsibility." He reached across the table and gently took her hand. "It's not about responsibility, Elena." She looked up. "It's about care." For a long time, she said nothing. Then, "I've spent so long doing everything alone. It feels strange to lean on someone now." Adrian smiled, but there was sadness in it. Maybe it's time to stop surviving and start living. A week later, Marco showed up again, this time at Ryden and Co. He waited outside the glass building, arms folded, eyes watching the revolving door. Eleanor saw him before he saw her. Her body tensed. Adrian was just stepping out of the elevator mid-conversation with the CFO when he noticed her frozen expression. "Elena," she pointed. Adrian followed her gaze. Then he stepped forward, calm and measured. Marco looked him up and down. "So this is the guy." Adrian didn't flinch. "Can I help you?" Marco smirked, just reminding her where she came from. "No," Adrian said, his voice low and precise. "You're reminding her why she left." Marco raised an eyebrow. "She thinks she's better than me now." "She is," Adrian replied without blinking. The air cracked. Marco scoffed. "This is cute. But if I want to see my son, you can't stop me." Adrian stepped closer, barely an inch between them. "But a judge can." Marco blinked. "Get off this property," Adrian said. "Now." And Marco, perhaps for the first time, realized the game had changed. He walked away, but not without one final glance back at Eleanor. "You'll regret this," he muttered. Elena didn't answer, because for the first time, she didn't believe him. That night, after Leo fell asleep with a blanket over his head and a stack of comic books by his side, Adrian came over with a bottle of wine and a quiet smile. They didn't talk about Marco. They didn't need to. Instead, they talked about memories about how life could twist in the most unexpected ways, how a car crash and a donated pint of blood could ripple through time and build something real. Elena looked at Adrian, eyes soft. "I didn't save you so you'd owe me," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but you did save me." And for the first time, Elena didn't deflect. She let herself be seen. She let herself be held. Not as someone in need of rescue, but as someone finally coming home. Summer arrived with longer days, warm breezes, and the hum of cicadas filling the air. Eleanor walked through the Ryden and Cobra lobby one early Friday morning, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor, a coffee in each hand, and her badge clipped to her new lanyard. Elena Cruz, head of community strategy. The promotion had come 3 months ago. Not suddenly, not as a gift, but as the result of consistent work that earned notice across the company. She had built partnerships with underserved neighborhoods, brought in measurable growth for their non-profit clients, and created outreach campaigns that not only performed, but meant something. She didn't just fit in anymore, she led. And with every new project, every meeting where her voice was the one the team leaned toward, she reclaimed pieces of herself that had once been buried beneath exhaustion, rent notices, and loneliness. But even as her world expanded, some shadows lingered. Marco had disappeared again. After Adrian's confrontation outside the building, he didn't call, didn't text, didn't try to force a legal route. Whether out of shame, spite, or cowardice, he vanished into the noise of the city. Still, the encounter left residue. That deep, familiar fear, the one that whispered, it could all be taken away again, was hard to silence. Adrian understood. He never pushed. Instead, he stayed steady, supportive, present in both Eleanor's and Leo's lives in the way Marco had never been. He came to Leo's school presentation about solar energy. He helped repaint the peeling walls of their apartment. He listened always and made space for her decisions, even when his own heart wanted more. One night on the rooftop of Adrian's building, they sat side by side, watching the city breathe beneath them. The stars were faint, but the air was calm, and Leo was asleep inside with the babysitter. Adrian turned to her. "I've been thinking." "Dangerous," she teased gently. He smiled, but his tone was serious. "I don't want to rush anything. I know your life hasn't exactly made room for trust." She waited. "But when you're ready, I want more with you. Not just partnership. Not just stolen evenings." Eleanor looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I want us," he said simply, "in whatever way feels right to you." She leaned her head against his shoulder, the city lights flickering below like blinking stars. "I don't know what right looks like yet," she said quietly. "But I know this what we have, it's not luck. It's something we built." Adrian's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Then we'll keep building." 3 months later, Elena stood on a stage at a non-profit gala hosted by Ryden and Cosden, introducing the youth mentorship program she had spent the past year developing. Leo watched from the front row, dressed in his favorite collared shirt legs, swinging beneath his chair. Adrian sat beside him, clapping with quiet pride. Her voice was calm as she spoke about opportunity resilience and how the most overlooked people often carried the deepest potential. After the event, as guests trickled out and the lights dimmed, an older woman approached her, a former nursing supervisor from the public hospital. "Eleanor," she said, surprised, "I almost didn't recognize you. I saw your name on the program and had to come." Elena hugged her, warmth flooding her chest. "It's been years. I still remember that night," the woman said softly. "The night you stayed behind and gave blood for a man we didn't even know. You saved him." Elena glanced toward Adrian, who was crouched beside Leo, helping him tie his shoelace. "Yes," she said, her voice quiet. "But it saved me too." A few days later, she found an envelope in her mailbox. No return address. Inside was a small, creased photograph. Marco, early 20s, standing on a pier, laughing. Behind it, a short note scribbled in handwriting she hadn't seen in years. "I wasn't ready back then. I'm sorry. You did more than I ever could. He's lucky to have you, M." She stared at it for a long time. Then she folded the photo, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it inside the same baby photo album where she'd once hidden the napkin. Not out of sentiment, but closure. Some things didn't need to come full circle. Some things just needed to end. One crisp October afternoon, Leo came home holding a handout from school. "We have to bring someone next week who's taught us something important." Elena looked up from the stove, smiling. "That sounds lovely." "Who are you thinking?" He shrugged. "Not sure yet." The next morning he handed the form to Adrian. "You've taught me a lot," he mumbled. "So, if you want to come, that'd be cool." Adrian blinked, then nodded slowly like someone holding back a wave of emotion. "Yeah, Leo, that'd be more than cool." Elena watched them from the kitchen window. Later that evening, Adrian helping Leo with a science project on the porch, laughter echoing faintly. Her eyes welled, but not from sadness. From a peace she hadn't known was possible. She didn't need validation anymore. Not from employers who doubted her resume. Not from a man who walked out when things got hard. Not even from herself. Because the work spoke for her. Her son's joy spoke for her. And the man whose life she once saved. He stood beside her now, not out of obligation, but because she had become someone worth standing beside. Someone who rebuilt her life brick by steady brick in her own time and on her own terms. One evening, Leo found the old photo album buried beneath a stack of books in the closet. He flipped through pages, baby photos, his tiny hand in hers, hospital bracelets, birthday cakes. Then he paused. "What's this?" he asked, holding up the folded napkin. Elena smiled faintly. "A thank you from someone I once helped." He turned it over, reading the faded ink. "Did you ever find them again?" She looked out the window, the city bathed in sunset. "Yes," she said, "and it changed everything." Have you ever done something kind, not knowing if it would ever matter? Sometimes the smallest moments become the ones that shape our entire lives. Elena didn't ask for anything in return. She just did what was right, and in the end, that choice came back to her in ways she never imagined. What about you? Have you ever helped someone only to discover years later how deeply it impacted them? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And if this story moved you, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for staying till the end. See you in the next one.